Hello, welcome guests. Today we talk about negotiating the elusive win-win. And the reason it's elusive is because everybody talks about it, but few people manage to get it. And today we'll learn some techniques and a framework to make the likelihood a lot greater that you can get a win-win in all of your forthcoming negotiations. To begin with, what is negotiation? A lot of people think it's, well, I know it when I see it, and that's largely true. But the answers I usually get when I pose that question are things like trying to reach an agreement, reaching an understanding with another person, bargaining or give and take. And inevitably, somebody mentions compromise, which is not one of my favorite words, as you will see. And that's all fine. But there's another way I like to look at it. It's really just communication with a persuasive angle. You're trying to persuade somebody to accept your terms or your proposal so that you and hopefully they will also benefit. Now, the win-win is especially unique in that a lot of people don't really understand it. The term is thrown about quite liberally. And it seems almost any time you reach an agreement, you say, yeah, good job, win-win. But a win-win is not just a good result. A win-win is when you maximize and optimize value. It's the best possible deal, not just a good deal. So how do you get that? A lot of it is just the mindset. Most people negotiate because they have a problem and they cannot solve it by themselves. They need somebody else to work with them to provide something so that they can meet their needs, because today's world is very complex and specialized and we can't do everything ourselves. So why would anybody entertain you? Why would they be interested in negotiating with you in the first place? Well, they also have a problem and they need you to help them solve that problem. So we have two people with two problems. And when they negotiate, they usually don't share their information very freely. They're a bit suspicious. If I tell them everything, they'll use it against me. I better play my cards close to the chest and maybe even mislead people deliberately. Somehow that will get me a better result. At least that's the thinking. So obviously, if you've got two people who are competing and not sharing information, it's going to be hard to get a win-win. What about this? Why not think of negotiation as two people with two perspectives, two sets of insights, trying to solve a single problem together? In other words, you and I have a problem. We need to reach an agreement that's satisfactory for both of us. How can we best do that? And we attack the problem together from the same side. In other words, joint problem solving. Instead of two problems, one problem, and we work on it together. Because negotiation is voluntary. If the result isn't acceptable, I don't have to agree to it. So I've got nothing to lose. In fact, I have a lot to gain by letting you know exactly how you can help me, and vice versa. So we want to learn to be a little more open, understanding that in the end, we're going to have the final say as to whether we are going to accept this agreement or not. First of all, negotiation is a process. There are 4 steps, and the first one is preparation and strategy. Negotiations are won or lost in the situation room or the war room, and not in the negotiating room. It's all about planning and preparation. So what do? Well, the actual negotiation begins a lot sooner than you might think. It begins as soon as you recognize a need that you cannot provide for on your own, even before you have a negotiating partner in mind, even before you're exactly sure of what you're looking for. Once you recognize that need, the negotiation has begun, and you're in that preparation phase where you're asking yourself a lot of questions. Things like, what do I really need to get out of this? What do I think the other party wants? What do I have to offer in exchange? What do they have? What are my constraints and their constraints in terms of timing and budget and perhaps other limitations? What kind of strategy or tactics might I employ? or might I expect them to use against me? And finally, if I don't get an agreement with this party, I still have to meet my needs somehow. And how else can I do that? What's my backup plan? Also, what do I think their backup plan is? Because if one of you doesn't have a backup plan, you're at a decided disadvantage. So that's the first phase, and that can go on quite a while. Fortunately, with the internet and LinkedIn and just the availability of information, there's a lot you can really do in terms of the preparation. Unfortunately, a lot of people are lazy and they don't really want to put in the work. Once you've prepared and you start talking to somebody, you don't want to get into how much is this. You want to build rapport and present yourself as likable, try to build a relationship and establish some trust, and get some information from them. During your preparation, you probably come up with a working hypothesis and some ideas about what they're looking for, what they've got, what their strategy is, and so on. And once you start talking to them, you have a chance to confirm some of these understandings, or maybe you have to revise your thinking. Information exchange could be something as innocuous as, hey, how's business? How are you doing in these challenging economic times? And the other party might say something revealing like, well, things have been very slow lately. Is that useful to know? Of course it is, because you're thinking, this guy sounds desperate. I think he might be able to accept a very good deal for me just to get something going. So information exchange and easing into the offers and counter offers, which is really the bargaining phase, the third phase. And this is where you make your demands, offers, counter offers, and probably compromise if necessary. The sort of give and take that we usually do in a negotiation, with an eye towards hopefully reaching not only an agreement, but a commitment. Because a lot of times we agree with somebody to do something and it doesn't happen. Fully 70% of all agreements are never fully implemented. And when you think about it, the whole point of business is to get things done. And if 70% of the time you think you've got a deal and it doesn't happen, the logistics don't execute themselves. So to get that commitment is beyond just a mere agreement. So this is what it looks like. And to guide us through, we're going to look at an 8-step template, which is based on a framework that came out of Harvard about 1980 by a guy, Professor Roger Fisher, who wrote a famous book called Getting to Yes, one of the most influential books on negotiation in probably the last half century. And fortunately, he was my first negotiation teacher, so I never had to learn the old school win-lose approach. I learned the win-win from the guy who pretty much invented it and the leading advocate. So this win-win or principled negotiation approach is about joint problem solving, sharing information. And so this 8-step template comes from that. I've modified it a little bit over the years, but this is the framework, and we'll talk about all of these in detail with some examples. First is distinguishing between positions and interests. Then we'll look at currencies or the bargaining chips that we may have available, different options that we might adopt as a solution to our problem, plan B in case we can't get a deal with this party, the rationale that we use to justify why our proposal should be accepted, not just to our counterpart, but to their stakeholders. So she's probably got a boss and she's concerned, what will her boss think if she comes back with this deal? Then we'll look at some communication and relationship issues, in particular, the beauty of no. A lot of people don't like to hear a no, but you're going to find that no is your best friend. And finally, we'll look at some issues that will help us in the implementation phase so that our agreement does get executed the way we intend. So first of all, positions versus interests. A position is basically your demand or what you think you want, what you say you want, and also what the other person is demanding or saying they want. And a lot of times we're not really sure what we want. We think we know, but we don't, as contrasted with interests, which is what we really need. So I like to use this metaphor of an iceberg. You can see part of the iceberg above the surface. That represents your position. You could see it because that's what you and your counterpart are saying. It's out in the open. But hidden beneath the surface is your true interest, what you really need out of this negotiation. And a lot of times that's not visible, and you're not sure what it is, either for yourself or certainly for the other party. You might be able to guess, but it's better to try to figure it out and maybe elicit it during the information exchange and the early stages of the negotiation. So let's say you feel that you need a raise. Okay, things are getting expensive, the cost of living is increasing, and you just can't cut it on your current salary. So you ask your boss for a raise, and you may go in and demand a raise. Boss, I need a raise. That's your position. It's what you think you want. But what do you really need? Well, the way you figure that out is you ask why. Why do I need a raise? Well, the cost of living is increasing and I can't keep up. I've got a family, the kids are going to school, they need insurance, et cetera, and the raise is how I get more money to take care of these needs. Now, maybe your boss is not in a position to give you a raise. Maybe there's no money in the budget for a raise at this time. Maybe you can only consider a raise at the time of your annual performance review, which is in 8 or 9 months. So it's not timely. So does that mean you're out of luck? Well, maybe you can figure out what your true interests are. It's not a raise per se, it's being able to maintain or improve your current standard of living in the face of rising costs. And there might be other ways to get that. So your boss might say, I can't give you a raise right now, but John just left the company last week. He had a company car. How about we give you his company car? You can sell yours, use the money, drive around for free. And we've also got a new health insurance plan. We can put you on that. It gives you better coverage for a little bit less than we've been paying. Would that help you out? And so now that you've got these other benefits, you might think, all right, I don't really need a raise because this will do it. So the position is something that we often get locked into, but it doesn't always serve us. We need to think in terms of interests. Second concept in the framework is currencies. And this, I think, is one of the most interesting parts of negotiation. It's basically about asking, what do I have that the other person might value that I can offer in exchange for something else? So anything we can exchange, tangible or intangible, as part of our negotiation is a currency. Obviously, we think of money as a currency, and it is, but it's not the only one. And then the thing that we're buying, a good or a service, for example. But there are a lot of other things that we can exchange during the negotiation. So there might be levels of quality. You can have a factory in Sri Lanka that makes t-shirts, and they can make very fancy, well-made t-shirts for the designers. And they can also, in that same factory, make very cheap and expensive t-shirts for Walmart or some other low-end brand. So this level of quality is something that you can exchange and you can get money in exchange for, or maybe some other currency. Quantity discounts is something we're familiar with. Obviously, if you buy something in bulk, you can get a better price. The terms of service. So when you buy a computer, you might have a service agreement where they will come to your site to check on any problems, or maybe you have to take your computer into the shop to be fixed, or maybe they'll only chat with you online, different levels of service, as well as delivery options and timing, for example, credit cards. You probably have a credit card and that lets you buy something now and you pay for it later. The bank has a lot more time than you do. And as long as you pay for it, they're willing to work with you. And the same with risk and insurance companies. We don't like risk, and the insurance companies will take it off our hands for a price. So these are all things we can exchange. Now, some of these are intangible, like perception, how people feel, even their emotions and ego needs, or in terms of branding, such as differentiation of your product or your unique selling proposition. So let's go back to that t-shirt example. You can buy a polo shirt and they've got some sort of animal on the chest. It might be an alligator, it might be a pony, it might be a droopy-eared hound dog. And some of these animals cost more than others, even though the shirt looks the same, it's the same fabric, it's the same stitching, it's just the shape of the thread. It forms a different shaped animal. But because of the perception, people might be willing to pay a lot more for one animal than another. So that's an example of an intangible currency that we can exchange. Here's another one of my favorite stories. Sometime in the 90s, I went to a concert by one of my favorite bands, Cheap Trick, and the lead guitarist had a habit of flinging his pick out into the audience every once in a while, quickly grabbing another one and continuing to play. So all night long, the picks were flying around me and I didn't get one. And I really wanted one. And this is before the internet, so I couldn't go online to find one. I had to get it then and there. So I went up to the stage and I asked one of the roadies, "Hey, are there any more picks around?" And he said, "Sorry, dude, they're all gone." And he's hacking his lungs out. And that gave me some information. So I was in a negotiation, and in my information exchange phase, didn't really have much time to prepare, but I found out something useful. He had a cold or a cough and could use some cough drops. And I happened to have some cough drops in my pocket. And so I saw an opportunity. I made a proposal. If you can get me a pick, I'll give you these cough drops. So he went into the bus with the band, and he came out a few minutes later with the coveted pick, and we made the exchange. Now, notice what happened. I gave him a few cough drops, which had zero value to me because I had a whole bag at home 20 minutes away. It really didn't cost me anything to give him these. And in exchange, I got a piece of rock and roll memorabilia, something one of a kind and unique, something that I valued highly. What did the roadie get? He got cough drops, which is exactly what he needed at that moment. It was almost a miracle that he was able to get them. And what did he give me in return? A pick. It wasn't even his. He swiped it from the guitar player. So he also gave something of zero value for something he valued highly. Now, I call this negotiating alchemy, where you can create something valuable out of nothing or almost nothing. And this is a great opportunity for a win-win because people value things differently, and you can leverage those differences and create value. Now, I thought I had a really good outcome getting that pick for just a few cough drops, but later I realized I could have done better. I should have asked him for a guitar. Here's another example. This guy, Kyle McDonald, was a Canadian, and he started out with a red paper clip, something that you might find in the wastebasket at your office, almost zero value. And over the course of a year or so, he made a series of trades online, each time trying to capture more value. And you can see the sequence of the trades here. Some of them look pretty comparable. At one point, you're talking about real value, 1 year rent-free in a home in Phoenix, Arizona. And a year's worth of housing has got to be worth quite a bit. I don't know the Phoenix market, but I'm sure we're talking many thousands of dollars. Traded that for an afternoon with Alice Cooper, traded that for a snow globe. And you may be thinking, a snow globe, who wants one of those? It's only worth a couple of bucks and nobody really wants them. But people value things differently. So if you're a snow globe collector, and you've got 5,000 of them in your collection, but you don't have that particular one, you might value it highly. And if you're a snow globe collector who is also a movie producer, you might be able to trade a role, a small role in a Hollywood movie. Who wouldn't want that? I think all of us would love to be in a movie, have a few lines, get paid, go to the theater with our friends and see our name rolling past in the credits, something very highly valued. And eventually, Kyle ended up with a house in Kipling, Canada. Now, I don't know the market in Kipling either. $45,000 doesn't sound like much of a house, but this is starting with a paper clip and in 1 year of part-time effort, ending up with a house free and clear. I don't think too many of us can buy a house just by 1 year of work at our job. So this is another example of negotiating alchemy, where you're leveraging differences in the way we value these currencies and capturing that value. The next concept is options. And there are two ways of looking at an option. One is a possible solution to our negotiating problem. So there may be a number of things we can decide on to agree with, and that's our outcome, or maybe we don't get an agreement. But the more options we have, the more likely it is that one of them will be a win-win. The other way of looking at options is a bundle of currencies. So you may offer A, B, and C, and they may offer D, E, and F, and maybe they don't want A, B, C, so you offer A, B, and W, or G, F, H, and T, and you just change the different components of the bundle, the currencies, and create all kinds of options. So going back to the case of asking for a raise or trying to negotiate an employment package, you've got a range of various salaries, you've got different benefit packages, so you can imagine there might be countless options or solutions to our negotiating problem. So the key to a win-win is to have a lot of good options. If you don't have many options, then you're probably just going to have to compromise and get a partial win, which brings us up to the problem with compromise. A lot of people think compromise is essential to negotiating. You don't get everything you want. The other guy can't expect everything he wants either. You're going to have to give up something to get the deal. Well, if it's a win-win, you don't have to give up. To me, this is the lazy way out. It sounds fair. It's pretty quick and easy, but it's not a win-win. So how does this work? Let me give you another story. Years ago, my wife and I were trying to decide on where to go for our vacation. In other words, we were negotiating. I wanted to go to Kyoto, Japan, and she wanted to go to Hawaii. Now, if we compromise and meet each other halfway, we'll end up somewhere in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, which is not a very good outcome. There's a few other options or possible solutions to our negotiating problem. One is we could go to Kyoto this year and I'll be happy and my wife will be miserable. And then the next year we can go to Hawaii and she'll be happy and I'll be miserable. That's not optimal. Or I could go to Kyoto and she could go to Hawaii and take separate vacations. That's not optimal. Maybe grounds for divorce even. Or we can remember that where you want to go for your holiday is a position. I want to go to Kyoto. I want to go to Hawaii. It's not really our interests. To get to our interest, we ask why. So I asked my wife, why do you want to go to Hawaii? And she explains that she likes a tropical vacation with a beach, something that's relaxing, where she can enjoy a drink and watch the sunset. And Kyoto is a very hectic place. You're visiting shrines and various tourist attractions on the bus, off the bus, and not sure if there's a beach there. And as for the sunset, I know it's in the land of the rising sun. I don't know if they actually have a sunset there either. And then she asked me, why do I want to go to Kyoto? And I explained that I like to go to a place where there's a lot of good art and architecture. And Kyoto has very fine art and stunning architecture, old temples made of wood without a single nail. I don't think you've got much art in Hawaii except for those carved coconut heads And the architecture is all concrete block post World War II, nothing very exciting there. And I also like a place with a sense of history. And Hawaii is fairly new, whereas Kyoto has a very rich and long history. Now that we've identified what we want, we can ask, is there a place that has all of these things, that has the tropical beaches and the relaxing sunsets, and also a lot of art and fascinating architecture and a rich history? And so we settled on Bali, and everybody was happy. So that was the win-win. All of our interests were satisfied, and that was the best outcome for us. Now, what if I can't reach an agreement despite having all of these different options? I need to have a backup plan or a plan B. In everyday language, we use the word option and alternative interchangeably. But in negotiation, they have distinct meanings. An option is a possible solution with my current negotiating partner. But if I don't reach an agreement with her, I need to satisfy my interests elsewhere. That would be an alternative. So the beauty of a plan B is it gives you confidence, because you know that if I don't get the deal with this party, I have this as a backup. So I know I'm going to get at least that much. It also serves as sort of a benchmark, because now I know roughly what to shoot for, and maybe I can do better. And you can always improve your plan B. For example, if I'm negotiating a job package, I might get an offer from company A, and then I can approach company B, and company A is my backup. So I know that company B has to match or exceed that. And there's no way I can do worse than what company A is going to give me. So it gives me that confidence. It's sort of a floor below which I'm not going to fall. And because I have a strong plan B, I'm a lot more confident when I negotiate with you. I dare say if you didn't have a backup plan or another offer, you probably wouldn't demand a raise from your boss. You'd be too scared, and probably rightly so. So plan B is important to have. Now, you also have to understand your counterpart has a plan B too, most likely. And so what is their plan? And can you diminish that in their eyes? So let's say I'm trying to negotiate a raise with my boss. My plan B is an offer I had from another company. My boss's plan B might be something like this. Hey, I don't have to give you a raise. I don't even have to hire you. I could hire somebody right out of school and give them a lot less than I'm paying you. So that sounds like a pretty good plan B. Now my job is, how do I minimize that? How do I diminish that in my boss's eyes? I might say something like, yeah, you could hire somebody right out of school, but there's a steep learning curve in this job, and it's going to take them a while to get up to speed and be as productive as I am. And if it doesn't work out, you're going to have to go through that whole searching and recruitment phase again. It's a lot better to just pay me a little more and know you're going to get what you need. So I've diminished his plan B, and because I've got a plan B, I'm going to get a good result. So that's your plan B. And the plan B doesn't have to be something the same as what you're trying to get from this party. For example, if I'm looking for a used car, there's a lot of places that might have that same model available. So the other dealer, that would be a plan B. But another alternative or a plan B might be I could take public transportation, or I could just use some ride-sharing platform, or I could walk or buy a bicycle. It doesn't have to be a car and another car. Similarly, if I don't get the raise, my plan B doesn't have to be another job offer at a similar company in the same industry. It could be something like going back to school and getting an advanced degree. It could be starting my own business or running away and joining the circus. Of course, it has to be something that's real, something that I would actually do. So if I'm not an entrepreneur and I don't have the money to start my own business and tide myself over while I'm trying to build my business, then maybe that's not a real plan B. Your plan B's got to be realistic. Then there's the rationale, which is usually some sort of external objective criterion that we use to persuade the other party that this is a good deal. It sounds complicated, but it's really simple. So in real estate, if you're looking for a house, or if you're trying to negotiate a raise or a pay package, you might look at the market. What does the market say? There are surveys that show what the property values are, what other companies are paying for somebody of your qualifications, and that's pretty persuasive. There might be some precedent or previous dealings that give you an idea of what's a fair outcome. It could be standards of fairness or some other moral standard, but you need some rationale to justify not only to your counterpart, but to their boss and stakeholders who have an interest in the outcome. Communication issues. Well, we could talk about this all day. You can talk about language and cultural issues. There are plenty of books on that. The wording and framing of your proposals, even the channels of negotiating. Should you negotiate face-to-face or by email or on the phone? For example, if you're not a confident negotiator, you may be intimidated in a face-to-face setting, so you might prefer the telephone or an email or some other indirect way of communicating. But I want to talk about something specific here, something that a lot of people ask me about, which is the word no. I like to say the road to yes passes through no. A lot of us think we want a yes, but if you get a very easy yes, if you make a proposal and they say, yeah, sure, I'll do that, you're probably going to think, wait a minute, that was too easy. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I'm not getting such a good deal here. So the easy yes gives us pause. It gives us what we call the winner's curse, where we got what we wanted, but now we're not sure that's such a good outcome. You want to get a no. Even though you may not like it, a no is good. Because if I say yes to your proposal, what does that really mean? It means I'm agreeing to your agenda. And I'm not sure what might happen, but since it's your agenda, you probably know something that I may not. And so if I say yes, I'm rather uncomfortable because I'm not sure what to expect. But when I say no, that means nothing changes. Status quo is maintained. It makes me feel like I'm in control. It's a way of saying, look, buddy, we're not going to agree to anything until I'm good and ready. I'm in control here. And that's what people are comfortable with. That's what they want. So that's what you want to give them. Not only give it to them, but make them give you the no. For example, anything that you can get a yes, you can ask in a different way where the right answer is no. Here's an easy example. Let's say you're at work and you've got a colleague, you want to talk to them about something for a few minutes, but they're busy. And so you might say, hey, you got a minute? And you're hoping they'll say yes. They're probably going to say, no, it's a little hectic, come back tomorrow, which is not what you wanted. But what if you ask it in a way where you're getting the no? So you say something like, is this a bad time? Now you want them to say no. And they probably will because they like to say no. Most likely they'll say, no, it's fine. I've got a few minutes. Come on in. So let them say no, and then you can negotiate to a yes. So after they've said no, 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 well, not really. Okay, yeah, you got a deal. You feel a lot more confident that you got just about as good a deal as you're going to get. So learn to love the no. Now, when you do get a no, obviously you don't want to walk away. In fact, every negotiation begins with a no, because if they said yes, you wouldn't be negotiating. So if they say no, ask why or why not. And they will say, well, because of A, B, and C. And so then you go back and you reformulate your proposal, taking into consideration their concerns A, B, and C, and you ask them again. And there's only two things that can happen. They could either say yes, in which case, congratulations, you got your deal, or they'll say no again, in which case you ask why. Well, because of D, E, and F, you go back, you reformulate, you repropose, and eventually you can turn that no into a yes. but don't go right away for the yes. Accept the no, learn to love it, let them feel like they're calling the shots, and then just reach an agreement the old-fashioned way where you have to grind it out, but you get a better deal. Relationship. A lot of people think that trust is essential. And it's nice, but it's not essential. I got a loan for my house, a loan for my car. The bank gave me all this money. I know they don't trust me, but that doesn't stop us from doing the deal. It's good to have, but not critical. But you do want to build a relationship, because in the modern world, we use the same counterparts, the same clients repeatedly, and we want to maintain and develop and even expand relationships. So the thing to remember about the relationship issue is when you're exchanging substantive currencies, like the pricing and the quantity and the quality and the service and the terms and conditions that we talked about. But you don't want to exchange those for things like, well, this guy is a very tough negotiator, he's intimidating, maybe if I give him a better price, he won't be so fierce with me. That's a bad idea, because when you give in and you give up substance in exchange for some personality consideration, like appeasement, you're telling him, this works for me. All you have to do is raise your voice and threaten me, and I'll give you a better deal. That's exactly the wrong approach. So it's okay to exchange substantive currencies for other substantive currencies, but don't try to trade off these things for personality or negotiating style or other non-substantive considerations. And finally, the last step is implementation. So we mentioned earlier that agreements do not execute themselves. 70% of them don't work out the way we expected them to. So what can we do to increase the likelihood that our agreement will work? One thing is to prepare a draft even before you start negotiating, a draft agreement of what you think the final outcome would look like. Something obviously acceptable and favorable to you, knowing that it may not look anything like that, but you need to have something in mind, something aspirational. This has the advantage of forcing you to think about things that you need to negotiate, but also things that could go wrong, some of the obstacles that you might be able to anticipate, and how you can avoid these things from derailing your negotiation. So one thing you might do is think, how can I minimize the risks to me? For example, if you're considering buying a business from somebody, it may be very hard to value. What exactly is it worth? He says it's going to do this much money next year, and you may not agree. Well, you can have some sort of contingency, whereas if it exceeds a certain amount, you'll pay additional later. But if it doesn't reach that, you pay less. So this way, it's fair. And whatever it turns out to be, it's agreeable. This is why we use guarantees and deposits, for example, in real estate. If you're going to take your home off the market because somebody agreed to buy it, there are things that can go wrong. But when they give you a deposit, that motivates them to make sure that they're going to do what they need to do, and you're not going to be out of pocket for taking your house off the market for that period of time. Or let's say you buy the house and it needs a little work, so you hire somebody to do the renovations. Do you pay them all up front? They'll probably take your money and you won't see them for a while because they've got your money and now they want to get somebody else's money and find a new customer. Or do you think, I'm not going to let them take me, I'm not going to pay them a cent until they finish? Well, that's not good either, because now they've got no motivation to do anything for you. So what you might do is arrange some sort of milestone payments where you get 25% up front. And then when you complete this part of the work, you get another 25, this stage 25. And then at the end, when you pass the final inspection, you get your last 25. This keeps them motivated. It also minimizes the chance that they'll disappear and you won't get what you paid for. Other things you might do with the implementation is dispute resolution methods. A lot of contracts now have mediation or arbitration provisions built in so that if there is a problem later, we know at least how we're going to handle it. So that's the 8 steps. And now I'd like to invite questions. Okay, if you don't have a plan B, you're not ready to negotiate. Remember, preparation is the key. And part of your preparation is asking, what do I do if I can't get an agreement with this party? I still have to solve my problem. So before you ask for a raise, try to find another offer. When you're looking for a car, try to find a few cars, a few houses, have a backup plan. And if you can't get something of the same type, what are some other possibilities that might work out for you? Until you have that plan B, you're really not prepared. You need to do some more homework before you call on a counterpart and try to negotiate an agreement. Yeah, it's actually quite common. Most people learn to negotiate from their boss on the job. When I teach my courses, very few people have had a previous course in negotiation, and yet they've been negotiating for years to various degrees of success. So what happens is when you're learning from your boss, she probably learned from her boss, who learned from his boss, all the way back to the Stone Age, where the win-lose law of the jungle kind of negotiating was the norm. This win-win approach has only been around for about 40 years, and not everybody is really familiar with it or is comfortable with it. So you will meet some tough negotiators who are the win-lose kind of negotiator, where they're not really interested in you, but they just want the best deal for themselves, and they might even play hardball to get it. So how does that work? Well, because you're looking to solve their problem as well as yours, you may be able to find a win-win for them. And when they see that they're going to get their win, they don't usually begrudge you your win because they're getting what they need. They're happy. It doesn't cost them any more to make you happy. Plus, that's the only way you're going to agree is if you get what you want. The other question that comes up in connection with that is concerning sharing information. We said that typically we keep our cards close to the chest. We don't share a lot of information. And yet, how are we going to find out what the win-win is, what they need to be happy, and how do they know what they have to do to make us happy? Well, and I've been in this situation many times where I share information, but they don't reciprocate. They still don't share anything with me. Does that put me at a disadvantage? No, because at the end of the day, if the proposal doesn't work for me, I don't agree to it. But when I share information with them, at least they know how they can make me happy. And it just makes it harder for me to make them happy and harder for both of us to get an agreement. But it's not necessarily fatal. So you can negotiate with the tough negotiators and with people who do not share information very freely. It's a little more challenging, but it's still doable because it's got to be something you're willing to agree to. Also happy if people connect with me on LinkedIn, or if they have any other questions, they can find me on my website, and I'd be happy to take it up at any time in the future.